Hello, my astrology friends. This is Lada from AstroladaOfficial here with the incredible financial astrologer Sama, who wants to update us on the craziness financially that's happening now. Hello, Sama.
Hello, everybody. Really happy to be back sharing on this very important topic, right? I'm sure if you're watching, you can tell there's probably potentially some bad consequences from not knowing this information. So happy to share what we can really discover now with some real world financial astrology.
Uh,
So, before we discover, what's going to happen, and I'm sharing this information and how it'll really benefit you guys. I'm sure you'll agree it's important that it makes sense because sometimes, this financial stuff, it can be so boring, but we know now more than ever, people need this information for all your own reasons. So any of you guys watching, feel free to pause the video. If I need to explain something better, just leave a comment, let me know, like it, and, I can help your understanding and learning this stuff. So like we said, when we met this summer, this is a time where most of the world is most sensitive to financial crisis. And now, of course, 3 months later, since you and I spoke, this is what you're seeing in the media. This is what other astrologers are talking about. Some people, some are still in denial. Some are angry because it's affecting retirement. And, some were able to take advantage this summer, those that were watching us and kind of knew what was going on. Some are depressed, some are accepting it, but people are really going through a lot. So this is a situation that's definitely caused a lot of us to just stop and become completely focused on what the right steps are to take care of yourself and think more about the economy or money to take the right steps for them and their family. So the first big question that I think we want to answer right out the gate is this it? Is this the big crash? Is this the end of the economy or the end of the world, right? I'm getting all sorts of emails and questions about crypto or what's going to happen with the market, and people want updates, right? And so we'll get into all of that. And actually, one of the things I do want to share before we get into that, if I can share my screen, there were some, let me see if I have you can go ahead and enable that feature for me, and I'll put that up. But there were some people, I've read through the comments when I was able to, and one of the criticisms people gave me is that, oh, the dollar's not going to go up. Who wants dollars? They've been printing too. There's no point in buying dollars, right? And so let me see if I can put, there we go. So we can see, you know, you and I, we spoke this summer, and now we see down here with the time and the months going by that we're into October now. And pretty much all the major currencies are doing what? They've gone down in comparison to the dollar, right? And so you guys can see how that prediction is going, along with many of the other predictions, right? And this is really based on understanding timing. They have the timing wrong. I understand why they're saying that. The dollar will fall later in 2023, but here's the most important part in terms of giving you the information to navigate 2022 safely. It's good to understand why the dollar is the safest place to be now, right? And so there's a way these things play out. And so globally, people have confidence in the US right now because everywhere else is in chaos because of the financial situation. So money is actually leaving other countries. It's leaving Europe, it's leaving Japan, and it's going to the US because we still have energy. There's no war here. And so for now, it looks safer. We still have problems too here in the US. And that's why I'm helping people move those dollars into real things, Taurus, like we talked about, right? So whether there's things like gold, silver, commodities, energy, gas, oil, Taurus things, right? So those are really the things to be accumulating now. So in terms of whether this is it, is this the big crash? Is it the end? Not quite, not yet, right? And you've been talking about this a little bit in the sense where you said Venus is with this eclipse, which can soften the effects of it, right? But there's something interesting about the position Venus is in, is that it's in the sign of Scorpio, which Venus does not enjoy, right? Venus rules what? It's money, right? So we could say money itself is being eclipsed in a way, right? Now, why doesn't Venus enjoy being in Scorpio, right? And this is really understanding how astrology works. I'm all about the tropical zodiac, the seasons and how that affects life here. Even though I use Vedic techniques, I get a lot of questions about that too. And fixed stars, right? So Venus is all about what? It's inward, it's receptive, it's harmonious, it's gentle, it's the feminine energy, it's desirable things. That's why it rules money in the first place, right? So that's all about harmony between one another. And Venus's ability to be harmonious in the sky territory of Scorpio is what we call debilitated, because Scorpio is very rebellious. It's inward. It's fixed water. So this is water that is, water's emotional, it's receptive. And this is an energy where it's not moving as much, right? So what's interesting about this eclipse, this will surprise you, is that it's actually Venus's debilitation that's actually preventing the big crash from happening right now. So that's just a lesson on how debilitation can actually be a good thing or manifest in ways that aren't the end of the world, so to speak. So I'm going to explain to you guys how Venus is actually supporting this eclipse. And I'm actually going to bring that chart back up just to help us visualize this a little better, right? So suppose, let's say you're a Bulgarian-based investor, right? You pay your bills and your bread. Let's say you do all that in euros and you invest in the US stock market, right? So we can see down here, euros are way down, and you would have lost a lot of money too if you were investing in the US stock market, because the US stock market, as everyone knows, has been down all year long since the nodes went into the financial axis of Taurus and Scorpio. But if your money was in euros and you put it in the US stock market, your money is actually in dollars now instead of euros. So if you're a foreign investor and you're investing in the US stock market, yes, the stock market went down, but the dollar did what compared to your local currency? It went up, right? So even though the stock market's going down, it's going up if your local currency is Canadian dollars, Australian dollars, the pound, euros, the yen, Canada, whoever, this, that, or the other thing. If you're a foreign investor and you are in the American stock market, then you aren't losing money to inflation like everybody else. So as more countries in the world are having blowups and revolutions, there's more revolutions now than ever in the world right now, right? So while all of that is going on, foreign money is just coming into the US stock market still. It's just Americans who aren't buying stocks because we know how bad it is here too, right? So with that said, even though none of the markets are going to be doing great, because of money going specifically into America, and because 80% of what the world uses as money is dollars, then it will be very hard to have a crash in the US stock market because of all the money that's coming in, which still prevents all of it from collapsing because the dollar is 80% of what the world uses. And so how that relates to Venus and Scorpio, by the way, is, again, Scorpio is rebellious. It's very inward. It understands its emotions, right? It doesn't need to tell you about it. Doesn't care if you understand, right? And so there's a lot of banks and organizations that are basically saying the US is being too extreme. They need to start printing money again. And these other places have started printing too. Whereas the guy in the US who runs the central bank is saying, nope, my job is to fight inflation. I'm not going to listen to that, right? So that's very Venus and Scorpio in the sense that the US has made decisions to try to fight inflation internally, and it's causing all sorts of disruptions across the world. But during this eclipse specifically, that debilitation is actually going to help the financial crisis not be complete chaos, at least not yet. So that's how that's working out.
Well, what they're doing is they've raised the interest rate at almost 7% in the States. Property prices started plummeting in the market, like it's
Yeah.
30% less than last year around this time.
Yeah, housing is going to continue. It's going to continue. Housing is going to continue to go down because people just can't really afford to pay for homes the way they could when money was cheaper, right? And this is actually, I actually see this happening in the UK. I don't know if you heard about this, but what they were doing there is a lot of pension funds. They're actually borrowing money for cheap on short term, and then they would let other people borrow it for the long term. And they were really doing this to make money, right? Because they, like everybody else, all this actually comes from inflation, right? So if you have inflation going up 2, 3, 4%, and you're holding on to people's money, well, it's your job to make more than inflation. So they start doing risky stuff. So it all comes back to what happens, all the bad things that happen when governments print money, because like me and you, they don't have to work for it. They can just sign a bill. We need to spend for this and then tax everybody, right? So now that governments are raising rates, right? All that, those deals that the pension funds were able to do, they basically would have had to pay up, right? The people who were letting them borrow the money said, hey, the rates are going up, you need to pay up. And basically 70% of them were like, we don't have the money, help us, right? So this was really bad for the UK because they were a few days prior announcing that they're going to raise rates too, right? They're going to make money more expensive to get because they're trying to fight inflation. That's why all these countries are trying to do this now, is they're realizing, hey, we need to fight inflation. Money's too cheap. We need to tighten this up. And in a matter of days, their whole system broke and they had to print a whole bunch more so that the pensions wouldn't collapse, right? Wow. So this is so embarrassing for them because it all happened in a few days where they're like, we're going to stop. And they started again. So it's really showing more of them losing control and their lack of understanding in the economy and the markets themselves, right? And this can actually trigger other countries to start printing more as well, right? Australia's already done it. The UK, of course, with their connections to the Eurozone, is probably going to cause the Eurozone to do the same too, right? They call this contagion in the economic speak or whatever. Right, so this will continue to happen, and this will actually cause countries to beg the US and say, hey, you guys should print money too, because this is destroying all of our own situations too. So in terms of timing then, the stock market is going to be weak until the spring, right? Up until now, Saturn has been in Aquarius. Saturn moves into Pisces in March of 2023. And that is an energy where authority figures become more confused, Saturn being authority, Pisces being a lot more spiritual than it is material, because it's the last sign. So we get a little more confused with what's going on, the less confident. And then Mars is going to leave Gemini and go into Cancer, right? So we're taking the youthful, fiery, young masculine energy, and we're putting in the mature feminine waters of Cancer, which also talks about not really being settled, right? Because Cancer is about home life and privacy and taking it easy. And then Mars is there. And so we're not really settled. And so there's fluctuating emotions too, right? So until then, while the US Central Bank and the guy who's running the show there, his name is Jerome Powell, while he's saying we're going to stick to getting the job done of bringing down inflation, if he doesn't stop, a lot of these nations and countries, they're going to have their economies blow up because of how much debt they have. But if he doesn't, we still have inflation, right? So no matter what he does, there's going to be damage because of how toxic and how clogged our system is with debt. And that's what these eclipses are teaching us, by the way, right? Like we said, Scorpio, fixed water. There can be an unhealthy, traumatic clinging on to things that isn't necessarily good for us. And so that's why this is an area of the sky that really can also relate to ruling backed up stagnant waste. And because this is also part of the financial axis for the world, we're seeing what? All this debt coming up to the surface like a clogged toilet or something, but it's coming through inflation and crisis, right? But because of what he's doing, again, things like oil, energy, they won't inflate as much next year in 2023. So the price of food and energy, they won't be rising as bad next year as they are this year. Right? That's because the dollar is strong now. That means people across the world can afford less things. And so if the dollar wasn't strong, then people across the world could still buy things easier, and then inflation would be much higher than it is now. So I guess the easiest way to summarize it really is the inflation problem for them, the way they think about it is, in order for inflation to go down, they need people to spend less money, which means they need us to be poor. Right? They're not going to come say this, but they need all of us to be poor. That's how they think they are going to fix this. So they think to fix inflation, you need to become poor, right? They think once nobody can afford things, then prices will come down.
Wow.
That also means they need more people to be what? Unemployed. It sounds ugly. They'll never tell you this, but it's true, right? Salaries and jobs, they're going up because they're trying to attract people, attract workers to compete with inflation. You know, my old corporate field, my LinkedIn, every day, like, hey, you still want to work? You still like, no, like I don't want to, but they really want people to come into jobs. They're really looking to hire people, right? And so if people are getting paid more in new jobs, or if they're getting new raises, then they're not becoming poor, right? So that means inflation still stays high. Again, they're not going to tell you guys this, but this is the truth. And remember, the reason we have inflation in the first place is because they're the ones printing the money. And all that printed money they did, it went into real estate, it went into the market. And so the solution they had when Pluto in 2008 went into Capricorn and broke the system in the first place, their solution was, let's all just print money together. And it benefited them. And we didn't notice how it was affecting inflation like a frog in boiling water. I don't know if you ever heard that analogy, where if the temperature is really low, you won't notice. And now in 2022, we're all realizing we're cooked, basically, right? It's like a form of government tax. That's what inflation is, right? They benefited, now we're paying for it. And now, so the poorest of the poor, they have to deal with the results of this stuff. This is the thing that made them rich. And now the people who are rich are saying, we're all going to have to go through harder times, everybody. Let's all go through this together. And really, the poor who are barely able to hang on right now, they're going to suffer the most. And people who, again, think that the solution is what? To make everybody else poorer. Like, it's just ridiculous. It's completely unfair. So anyway, where was I? We'll see inflation come down. And that doesn't necessarily mean prices, by the way, but to some degree, we won't see it growing as much, especially once Mars starts moving direct and it leaves the sign of Gemini. It'll look like things are getting a lot better, right? The economic fears will really slow down spending. People will just be like, this market is done, forget it, right? And then in the US, we'll be more concerned about the global economy breaking. So when Saturn moves into Pisces and then Mars moves into Cancer, we're also going to have Pluto moving into Aquarius at the end of March too. That is a lot of energy changing signs, right? So that means then new conditions, new game, new situation, right? So after that, this is kind of the time where the fear of the crisis settled, right? So some of my private clients are asking me, so when should I buy back in, or, when's a good time to consider the market, or will it go back up again? And one of the pieces of advice I've given them is to really pay attention to how things look in terms of bottoms or lows in terms of mid-January before March, right? So that kind of 1.5 to 2 month period, because March is new energy. It's very new. And between then and now, the problem that's being aggravated is Mars spending 5 months in the sign of Gemini. And that problem, please understand, that problem is war. And the threat of war is actually going to intensify.
It's a human sign, people.
Yeah, exactly.
Rather.
It's a human.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it really depends on how you look at it. It's my opinion that we've been in World War III for like 3 years now. They just don't really talk about it in the media that way because they're trying to be diplomatic still, or they're just pretending to be. I don't know what they're doing. But Russia, China, all these countries have really understood how fair this whole dollar situation is. And so because of the way things are breaking, and where the nodes are going to be, Russia is basically going to be forced or manipulated into retaliating or causing more conflict, and most likely from the US. History shows what? Wars are about energy, they're about oil, they're about power, Taurus related things. And this is why last time Uranus was in Taurus, Hitler was coming to power, is considered the time of the dictator, and people were what? Fighting over energy, right? Hitler went into Romania for what? Oil. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor for what? The US cut Japan out of oil. Now we have this Nord Stream pipeline that's been sabotaged, and really only one of two countries could have done that. If Russia wanted to do it, they could have just turned it off. So you can think what, you know, it's not hard to figure out who did what, right? So markets breaking, and then a weak economy and unemployment, and then the consequences of war. This is where things then change around March. And Lada, as you know, the nodes are changing signs halfway next year. The nodes are moving, yes. The north node is moving into Aries. South node is moving into Libra. In Vedic astrology, we could literally translate that into, when we say the north node is moving into Aries, we could say the dragon is moving into the battlefield, so to speak, right? That we could translate it to that. Have you ever seen Game of Thrones, by the way?
Yes.
Yeah.
The
That
final
crazy white dragons and all that. That's like a visual of the north node moving into Aries. And so we're going to see us, unfortunately, we are going to see this war dynamic escalate. And that's going to affect financial policies too. So before the system is revamped, because of all these eclipses on the financial axis, when that shift happens, what are governments going to do? They're going to turn and point the finger at each other and say, you did this, this is your fault. This is the US's fault. No, it's their fault, because Ketu, the South Node, is contracting diplomacy, Libra, and we're expanding into independence, identity. So these are countries fighting for their survival, basically. No matter what your opinion is on Russia, that this is going to be an Aries thing where they're going to be fighting for the survival of their country. The US might be fighting for the survival of its existence as well, right? You have Pluto return going on in our chart too, right? So this all comes back to this energy revolution in the territory of the sky known as Taurus, right? So again, you guys, it's genuinely valuable physical material things that give us power, right? The second house in Taurus is about power, like horsepower, like the, you know, big animals that can carry things, right? You want to sum it all up, it's grab as much of those things as you possibly can while you still can, you know,
property.
because yeah,
even though it's very high now.
Well, so real estate is different in the sense of what's happening with its nodal change, but in terms of when that shifts in the next 3-4 years, then it starts its climb again. Right. So the downturn for real estate, it's only it's 3-4 years. We only have what, 2-3 years left of that. And even though the prices are coming down, unless you have a lot of money, Taurus, you have actual cash, then if you're trying to borrow to buy land, that's going to be difficult too. So it's great if you have money, but if you don't, then it's harder to borrow. So it still becomes
it's option.
Yeah, it still becomes, what are these real physical things that are valuable, right? So that's the economy, you know, but on a personal level, while these eclipses are really exposing a lot of weaknesses and powerlessness and leaders and the people and all that, this is really a time for people to be stepping into their own power, to help themselves, to help others, because whatever these 8 weeks trigger in the economy, we have to just completely let go. Now, with me, I see this because leaders are going to be confused. Mars is going to be squared Neptune all through November. So the media, which is ruled by Neptune, is going to make things more confusing because confusion is Neptune as well. And this can talk about, again, governments printing more because Neptune talks about inflation and just things being expanded and confusing, you know, and then this is Mars triggering Neptune, right? So that's aggravating all of these things, right? So the media can just be more aggravating, can aggravate people. So it might be a time where maybe you want to detox from some of that stuff a little bit, or turn some of that off a little bit, because with the confusion element of Neptune, people might not be seeing these things very clearly. Okay. So yeah. And then on a personal level, I don't really like doing the vague general sign stuff. I really prefer to work with people one-on-one, but I did get asked for it. Aries might experience this as change of jobs. Geminis can actually profit from some of this or get new opportunities from their social groups. For Cancer, it's more of like a change to career path and legacy, right? So that could be promotions, that could be job change or retirement for some of you guys. For Virgos, it can be big changes where the crisis can be felt more heavily financially, in a way where you guys are actually getting pulled out of old routines, right? And might need to be less self-reliant for a little bit of a time. And then Scorpios, this is really karmic for you guys as well. So that can also cause some job or career arrangements. And really for the other signs I didn't mention, it's going to be more internal or with relationships in that way. But again, that's very general. If you're not a Scorpio rising, you might have a bunch of other planets there, right? So it really pays to really understand your chart and have that broken down by someone
You do
who
offer
understands.
readings. I have put a link below. Sama does
Yeah.
financial astrology according to your own horoscope. Uh, and he's usually backlogged. But you can, if you order early on, he'll get to you as early as possible. I have one question. Actually, my husband just wrote it to me and said, Sama said investing in commodities, oil, gold, etc. Does that mean stocks of these will do well or just the physical?
Both will do well, but the stock market itself will suffer until about spring of next year. So as these things are coming down, this is a way to kind of, especially if you have cash, just be on the sidelines, right? This is why we gave people that advice last summer. While Mars is in Taurus and things are going up, use that as an opportunity to exit and have money on the sidelines, because I wanted to help people navigate this time appropriately, right? And so as the market comes down and you have your money on the side, you wait. Mars starts to finally move in January. That's a time then you can consider buying things at a lower price.
Well,
Right.
it's too late now to leave, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, we're in the zone that we talked about, right? So you kind of gotta just watch the fireworks right now. And then in a couple of months, then you can either, if it's physical or if it's the stocks, you can get that. But again, what I recommend is think about owning physical things that will actually benefit you and your family that you can use, even if it's little things in the home or bike just to get around, you name it. Just be creative and be able to put that money in physical things you can own, because the world is becoming more digital. That's Aquarius. Aquarius decentralizes things. And when we get into 2025, I'll come back and talk about that a lot more. But there's this digital component that is going to lead to this idea of you'll own nothing. We're all going to share everything. So accumulate Taurus things that you can own that are physical while you still can. That's part of meeting people for sure.
Thank you so much, Sama. Again, fascinating speaking to you, and looking forward to have you as often as you can. People love your updates.
I'll definitely come back and talk about the recession versus depression, if that's going to be the case, like I promised.
That would be fascinating.
And I think too, what'll be helpful during this time, because I did get asked about it, is I think we can go ahead and just do another discount of another $100 off until, I guess, the lunar eclipse. I think that makes sense, because what's great about the more money reading I've been doing for people is all the fascinating questions I get, all these unique circumstances and how some of them are actually a lot of similar to. And so helping people get set up well for these situations, and also in terms of like life purpose and direction. I love how the reading changes and evolves into really just poking holes in people's limiting beliefs and shining a light on these things so they no longer hold them back. Whether it's things like, I'll never be happy until I have expensive things, or I'm not worthy of attention, or I have nothing to give to other people, or no one will love me if I have money, or work is slavery, I'll never have my dream job, or if I want more money, then I'm greedy, or it's the root of all evil, or the only way to make money is work really hard. This reading says, F all that. Who are you really? Who are you developing into? What makes you happy, right? And so that's what we uncover. And if you want to benefit from that, I think it's fair to just give a few weeks discount because of what's happening in the world. But like we promised, I will be back. We'll dive in using astrology to uncover how bad it'll be, if it's just going to be a recession or turn into a depression. Again, I'm saying basically this is going to be the worst of it, and we'll see improvement and change in between January and March of next year. But then we want to understand what happens next. So it was just really important just to answer, what countries are going to be impacted now, because I got a lot of that. Can you talk about this? Can you talk about that? But I just wanted people to really know how to secure your money if you needed to now. Make sure your bank will insure whatever savings you have in there during this time. Otherwise, you're probably better off being in dollars until Mars starts moving direct. So
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Very powerful again, and I may go ahead and do this discount for $100 off your personal reading, financial personal reading. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
All right. Until next